right now. Look at the way Mac's playing. He's done exactly what he's supposed to do and then some to give the 49ers a chance, not turning it over, throwing touchdowns, putting up yards, and winning. Mac's doing a great job of protecting it and making sure you're doing the things that continue to possess the ball and give you a chance to win, whether it's 17-14 or 33-10. I really don't care, and I don't see a statistic in there that's – I'd rather have an ugly win than a pretty loss.
What is this like for a locker room? I know you've been a starter, you've been a backup. Like, what is this like when the starter goes down and then the backup comes in and people's eyebrows start raising? What's this like for the guys?
Well, people's eyebrows start raising when a backup comes in and makes one completion. So, we're always pretty popular and say you got to sustain it, but you guys are lucky. See, most players in locker rooms will look at it like this is a blessing in organizations. What a blessing. And remember, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know of how Kyle felt about Mac Jones when he came out of school, right, guys? I mean, I know we're going to get into it, but what happens in the backup starter, the starter is the guy, and you know that your job as a backup is to, as Denny Green always used to say to me, drive the bus. And what he simply meant by that was we're not changing anything. We're not backing off the game plan. We got you on here. You're under contract for a reason. Drive the bus, which means get us home safely. And he never, ever once told me, don't lose the game. Don't lose it for us. It was always go win it, take care of your business, drive the bus. So, the dynamic is you want two of them because most places when you say you got two, you ain't got one. Well, in San Francisco, they're fortunate. They have two, and Mac Jones is doing exactly what you're supposed to do. You want to make it miserable on the coach to replace you. You want to make sure you support the guy who's starting and get the same respect when you're starting. And you want to go with your obligations, not to whether Brock Purdy's feelings are hurt or when Brock was taking over for Trey or Jimmy or whoever else. Your obligation is to win games. And it's not just to lose, it's to win games and gain the trust. So if something were to happen along the way, then you're prepared, whether it's a long-term injury or not. I love it. And you know what? As a backup, I always wanted to go in there and win, and not for the next week there was controversy, just so you could say, coaches trust me, my players trust me, and if I'm called upon, the confidence continues to grow. This is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Now, the tough thing is if it keeps rolling, what decisions do you make? Do you roll with a hot hand? Do you go back to the guy? Can you lose your job as a starter? You absolutely can. You guys know my affinity for Purdy, but in any backup or start, Wentz and J.J. McCarthy are going through this right now. They're going through the same thing about, Wentz is playing pretty well and they're winning. So I think it's a great problem to have, but you have to manage it properly as a head coach. And the truth is you want them both playing great, and then you go from there. You'll get a feel for who's supposed to play, trust me, and you can't be in the worrying about people's feelings business. You got to worry about an organization.
It's not so much about people's feelings. It's more about people's contracts. How much does that play into it when Brock Purdy's set to make $53 million a year next year?
Well, most people, and that's next year, right? So we'll take care of it. But you're right. It's a great point. And anybody is naive to think that money isn't – now, I'm not speaking for Kyle or John or anybody else there, but we're naive to think that it's just as easy to replace a guy who's making $53 million as it is a guy making $53,000. It's not. That comes into play. But that's where that decision we were just talking about, is it tough or is it a problem? That's where it gets tough. Are you making the decision based on, listen, we signed him and he's our guy and we believe he's the future? There's no doubt. But let me take you back. Even though the money's different, when Brock got the job, nobody expected that. He had to go through hell. He was just trying to make a team. So we didn't worry about where Trey Lance was drafted, even though he wasn't making, he was a first-round pick. Or, Jimmy hadn't gone to a Super Bowl. So, yes, but I honestly, guys, I'm just trying to put myself in the situation of the organization, the head coach. I'm not worried about Brock's contract next year. I'm worried about, is he ready? And when he comes in, if Mac's 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, and he comes in and you put him in, that's great. Now pressure falls back on Brock to do what he did do to earn the $53 million and to put him in a position where they could let everybody else go do their thing and they committed to long-term. So, and just because it's a long-term commitment doesn't make it's the short-term answer. And it would be either way if it was Mac or him. So short-term and long-term have to come into it. I know this is 2025. And I know the 49ers are 4-1, and nobody with the injuries expected them to be here, even though the organization's always held in high regard because they win. But I'm going to deal with that later. And I'll deal if it becomes an off-season issue, then we'll deal with it. And you say, well, do we keep them both? As one wants to go start, they're both capable of starting. But it does come into play, and it is part of it. And the optics are part of it, whether we want to admit it or not. But it's hard to sift through. But you do have to get out of the feel-good business and play the guy in 2025, regardless of who it is, that gives you the best chance to win. And in truth, right now, look at the way Mac's playing. He's done exactly what he's supposed to do and then some to give the 49ers a chance, not turning it over, throwing touchdowns, putting up yards, and winning. And it's important.
Sean, I love that you brought up the word optics because this is interesting to me. As you said, the numbers are there. 6 touchdowns, 1 pick. The wins are there, 3-0. Greg Cosell said something to us interesting, though. He's like, how does everybody feel about this if Kyron Williams doesn't fumble at the one? In other words, it's like the Niners are not, they're not scoring 30 or 40 points. These are grinder games that could have gone either way. I'm interested in just your quarterback view of what you're seeing Mac Jones do. How well is he playing?
And real quick about that, and if my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle, right?
That's true, too.
I think, Greg's one of the greatest. I think Greg's the most underrated football guy on the planet. I do. I love him. And when you always learn something from Greg Cosell. You do. And I'm a huge fan. And he knows this, but the thing about it didn't. And then it took, the Kyron Williams fumble, but how did you get in position to be winning? What do we want? I know we all want 450 yards passing, a big win, score 40 points. But right now I'm looking for how are you playing under duress when we need a win? Are you throwing to the other team and putting us in a bigger bind? Or are you taking a turnover? Or are you taking a 3-and-out by them and punting and flipping the field and giving us a chance where you're not constantly putting the defense in a bind? You know what, guys? Even though their body types may be different, I think the similarities in the skill set with Brock and him are very similar. Neither one are what you'd say, oh, my gosh, overpowering arm. Neither one of them are overpowering physical specimen that run 4.5. Underrated athletes, both of them, that could buy some time, maybe one a little quicker. Both throw the ball on time with accuracy, with anticipation. When they hold it longer, they get in a little more trouble. Just like guys, Marino could hold it a little longer, but he never held it longer because the ball came out on time. Elway could hold it a little longer. The similarities, what I see is a guy who's making good decisions, and it starts there. And here's the most important thing. Well, when you got a big play, we've seen it in the past, and we see it every week with great players or quarterbacks that are winning. We're hearing that same thing in Philly. Well, he's not dominating the passing game, but they just keep winning with Jalen Hurts. In this case, I don't think you're ever going to be wowed by, oh, my gosh. But what happens is, with good decisions, they're making Mac Jones right now is making simple plays. When you guys got to watch Joe Montana and Steve Young at their best, I'm not comparing Brock or Mac by any stretch, but what did they always do? When you watched Drew Brees, when you watched Tom Brady, when you watched the way these guys play, spectacular is fine. Nobody lives in the spectacular part of it. Mahomes has made plenty of them as spectacular plays. Where we live as quarterbacks is making the obvious play look obvious. The shallow cross, the ball to the flat, where you're not yanking to the ground. Those things that keep chains moving. And then when the big play offers itself and you can hit a stutter go or a bang post in the red zone, that's when you got to make those. But the big plays don't mean a hill of beans once or twice a game. If all the other 60 snaps or the 30 throws, it's inaccurate. It's a catch and tackle for an 8-yard gain instead of a 10-yard gain. What I see is a guy that's throwing on time. And I know we could say, well, what if this guy did this? And if they wouldn't have blocked this, or if Kyron Williams doesn't lay it on the ground. But he did. And that's part of the team effort. And how'd you get him in position that one play, a Kyron Williams fumble, ended up costing the other team the game? And then a goal line stand on a poor decision or whatever by McVay to make the call. So to me, it comes with anticipation, accuracy, and I think that Mac Jones is doing a great job, and it's easy to do as a starter now. It's from going from a backup to a starter to prove to the world that you belong. Because, he was pretty good a rookie year, but he's been a little bit of a journeyman. He wants to be a starter. What happens is you get to it, and I learned a valuable lesson that way, and then you settle back in, is quit trying to do everything to prove to the world that, man, look how good I am. I can make every play. Make the simple play. Drive the bus and get us home safely, and that's what he's doing. The big plays will eventually come, and he's doing it without all of his with Ayuk and Kittle. And what happens then, too, is you play hero ball. Oh, my gosh, I got to fit this in. No, you actually don't. Throw the check down, give me 8. We'll come back and take a shot on second down. If it's there, it's not, give me another first down. And I think when the 49ers have been at their best, Montana was great at making the simple play, young, but even in the last, half dozen decade, when it was Jimmy or when it was Brock or when it's Mac, is they're playing within what Kyle does, and the ball is accurate coming out on time, and they continue possessions and making throws where the guy catches it and can do some stuff after the catch, and they're not trying to make everything happen and prove to the world that I'm a starter. When you start doing that, you put your team in a bind. Because right now with these injuries, this team doesn't want to be in a situation where, you throw 2 picks, lay one on the ground. We saw that happen with Brock's last start, right? Didn't he throw 2 picks and fumble on the ground?
Yep.
What happened in that start? And that's not Brock's game. Protect the ball, although I know at times interceptions happen. But Mac's doing a great job, and quite frankly, a great job times 2 of protecting it and making sure you're doing the things that continue to possess the ball and give you a chance to win, whether it's 17-14 or 33-10. I really don't care, and I don't see a statistic in there that's – I'd rather have an ugly win than a pretty loss. He threw for 330. Yeah, Russ Wilson threw for 455 against the Cowboys, but Russ Wilson can't lead him and couldn't win, and he's now on the bench, and a rookie's taken over and completes 115 yards worth of balls and wins the game. That's the energy I want. You can give me the stats all you want, but there's only one that matters, and it's that left-hand column that says wins, and you're getting production out of it. And if people say, well, who's he doing it against? Well, I do believe he beat the Rams, who a lot of people think is the best team in football, so even with 2 losses. So I like what he's doing, and it's a good problem to have if you're the 49ers.
You mentioned the commonality. Jimmy Garoppolo was here as well. Kyle Shanahan. When you watch Kyle and the scheme and the design and what he's asking both these QBs to do, what do you make of Shanahan and just what a masterclass it's been for him so far this year?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Normally going in, guys, I'm glad we're talking today. At the beginning, I know, Mark, you've tried to, and Dibs, to answer your question, is that, going into this year, this is the first time probably in 7 or 8 years, honest to God, since I've been coming on with you guys and coming on your great station, that I didn't have a feel for the 49ers. With a wide receiver to trouble and some injuries and banged up last year, and we know with Fred and George and all those guys on the field, but banged up again. I didn't have a great feel for them this year, and I study them hard because I love this organization and my affinity for you guys there, and I didn't have a feel for them. They're like them were, and I was curious about Detroit because the coordinator changes, right? Well, I got my answer, I think, in Detroit, and I'm getting it here, but it goes to, and Kyle's had loaded roster. Well, this year it's like, well, we got a loaded roster, but we don't have access to everybody. And then our starting quarterback gets hurt, and then a receiver's hurt, and then George Kittle's down again, and then it just one after the other, which they dealt with. Reminds me of the Houston Astros, your baseball team this year. Every time you turn around, it's somebody else. But it's Kyle. This is where you test like a quarterback under duress. This is where you find out just how good Kyle is. I think we all think he's good, and I know he's come under fire about not winning the Super Bowl, but this is where we find out how good it is, where you don't have your full arsenal and you're still winning. And you're doing with a backup quarterback who was a journeyman, is back at it, a former first-round pick, and you just plug guys in. And I think you got to be more than a plug and play. I know people think, oh, anybody can play in the system. But no, they're just smart at evaluating the guys that can. That's a big – Trey Lance, talented guy, couldn't play in that system. Somewhere else, still a backup. At least he appeared not to be able to play in the system. So to me, the brilliance of it is knowing the guys that can and then maximizing whatever it is, whatever that talent is. Not a big arm, okay, we got to get the ball out on time. Big arm, okay, we got to make sure we're accurate and our mechanics are set. I think this is the truest test of who a coach is when he faces this stuff. And I think Kyle Shanahan, because with all that's gone on, guys, I don't even think you guys there would have said 4-1 start would have been what we saw would have been the way it is. So to me, that's a sign of a good team that can win ugly at times, but they can also win with backups. And there's not a huge loss when a different quarterback or a different receiver comes in. And Kyle is pretty brilliant at putting people in position to succeed, whether they're a starter or backup.